Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This is where we do the hard work for you, cutting through all the noise, all the information overload, to give you a shortcut to really understanding a topic. We sift through the sources, pull out the key insights, the surprising bits, all to get you to that aha moment.
That's the goal.
And today, we're taking on something huge, a really monumental journey, actually. We're doing a deep dive into the just fascinating world of ancient civilizations.
Foundational, really.
Absolutely. We've got a whole stack of sources here, educational video transcripts, detailed academic stuff, you name it. And our mission for you listening is to figure out, what defined these societies?
Yeah.
Where did they actually come from? And what's their legacy? Because they really did build the framework for, everything that came after.
And it's not just dusty history. It's quite amazing how much these ancient societies, thousands of years ago, still shape how we live today. As we go through this, you'll start seeing these connections, these direct lines from what they figured out back then to things we use or think about now. Understanding them isn't just about dates and kings. It's crucial for understanding ourselves.
Okay, let's get into it then. How does something like a civilization so complex, so organized, how does that even start? Because, for most of human history, people were nomads, right? Hunter-gatherers.
Yeah.
Moving around.
Constantly moving, yeah. Living day to day.
So what was the big shift? What took us from that to, settling down, eventually building these massive societies? The sources seem to point to a pretty humble beginning. It starts with people deciding to just stop wandering.
That's the core of it. That first huge leap was deciding to stay put, to form villages.
And live there for a long time, like generations.
Exactly. Early farming, growing grains, domesticating animals that created a more stable food source. Suddenly you could stay in one place. You could support larger groups. So people lived in these villages, getting better at farming, figuring out how to live together.
But it wasn't all equal, was it? Even in those early villages.
No, not at all. And this is where things get really interesting. A natural division started to appear, almost inevitably.
Oh, so?
Well, think about farming. Some families, or maybe whole villages, just got lucky with the land. Really fertile soil, easy access to water. They had great harvests, maybe even a surplus.
Okay, so they got wealthy.
Relatively speaking, yes, they prospered. But others? Maybe their land was rocky, or getting water was a constant struggle. They'd have poor harvests, maybe struggled just to get by.
So right there in the same village, you start seeing rich and poor.
Precisely. Living side by side, but experiencing very different realities. And that disparity, that difference in wealth, it didn't just stay an economic thing, it actually started to change the physical structure of their communities.
What do you mean?
Well, the rich, the ones doing well, along with their families and relatives, they started to separate themselves a bit. They didn't just build bigger houses in the old village, they started creating entirely new settlement.
Ah, okay. Not just expanding the village, but building something new.
Something fundamentally different. These new places weren't made of the simple clay bricks anymore. They used stone. Much more permanent, more impressive. They had properly constructed streets, not just paths.
And walls, I saw that mentioned.
Massive walls, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Which tells you something, right? About needing defense, maybe, or just marking themselves as distinct, important. And they built dedicated temples, big ones, for worship. These weren't just overgrown villages, they were planned, fortified, religious centers.
And the people living inside these walls, in the stone houses, they weren't just villagers anymore.
No, the sources say they became citizens. That's a huge shift in identity. It suggests a different relationship to the place, maybe different rights, different responsibilities.
A more complex social setup.
Definitely. And here's a key economic point. These new citizens living in the cities, they generally stopped doing the farming themselves.
So who did the farming?
The poor, from the original villages. They would work the land owned by the wealthy citizens in the cities. And the sources are quite blunt. Much of the harvest out of it was taken by wealthy people who live in the cities.
Wow. So that sets up a whole system of dependency, really. A clear hierarchy.
Absolutely. A stratified economic and social structure. And that, right there, is the foundation for what we start to recognize as a civilization.
So let's nail that down then. What makes something a civilization? How do we define it based on what these sources say, beyond just being a big village with some rich people?
Right, it's a collection of characteristics. It's not just one thing.
Okay, so first, it's a collection of these cities we just described and the citizens living in them.
Yes, and these cities were clearly larger than a village. Scale matters, urban density.
But more than just size, you mentioned writing.
Crucial. Citizens practiced writing scripts. Think about what that enables: record-keeping, laws, history, literature. It's a massive leap.
Okay, so cities, citizens, writing. What else?
A clear group of people whose job it was to rule. A government, essentially. Not just informal leadership, but an established ruling class or system.
Got it. And religion. Those temples must have been important.
Hugely important. People built dedicated religious places. Shared beliefs, shared rituals, organized religion, that's another key piece.
And one more.
Trade. Yes, engagement in trading with the distant countries. Looking outwards, complex economic networks that go beyond just local exchange, that indicate sophisticated logistics, maybe even diplomacy.
So putting it all together. Cities, citizens, writing, rulers, religion, long-distance trade. That's the package.
That seems to be the core definition emerging from these sources. And if you look at the bigger picture, one source defines civilization as fundamentally a process which reflects man's progress.
Progress.
Yeah, it's about communities getting organized beyond just basic survival, building cities with intention, creating governments, developing technology, sharing a culture. It's a whole societal upgrade, you could say. A new way of being human, really.
Okay, that makes sense. But, you might be sitting there listening thinking, right, ancient history, got it. But why should I care? This stuff happened thousands of years ago. What does it have to do with my life now? It's a fair question.
It is, and the answer is a lot, actually. It's quite incredible how foundational these ancient discoveries were. The sources say it directly. Various things which were produced by those who lived then are useful for our lives even today.
So it's not just abstract knowledge.
Not at all. These people, across different civilizations, they bestowed many different things to the world. Things we completely take for granted.
Like what? Give us some examples.
Okay, take something really basic, how we measure things. Time and angles. The idea that a circle has 360 degrees,
Yeah.
that comes from ancient Mesopotamia. Their mathematicians figured that out. Same with dividing time, 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour. That base 60 system, that was them.
Wow. I never thought about where that came from.
Well,
You could use it.
Exactly. It was linked to their astronomy, tracking stars, predicting seasons. Super important for farming. But we still use that fundamental system for everything from navigation to scheduling our day.
Incredible. Okay, what else?
Well, let's jump over to the Hwang Ho Civilization in ancient China at the Yellow River. They gave us some game changers. Gunpowder, for one.
Right, gunpowder. Huge impact.
Initially maybe accidental by alchemists, but yeah. Then there's the compass. Imagine sailing or exploring without a reliable way to know direction.
Impossible, almost. Global trade wouldn't have happened the same way.
Precisely. And two more huge ones from them: paper and the printing machine, even the early versions.
Paper and printing.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it's hard to imagine modern life without those.
Yeah.
Communication, education, everything relies on them.
Seriously, just try to picture your day without paper or printed materials, or even digital versions which evolved from that. It's fundamental.
Okay, one more. You mentioned the Maya.
Yes, the Maya civilization in Mesoamerica. Our sources credit them with producing the first rubber ball.
A rubber ball, like for playing games.
Exactly. They had this really important ritual ball game. But the process itself, tapping rubber trees for latex, then processing it so it wouldn't be sticky, making it bounce, that was serious innovation. Early materials science.
And rubber's everywhere now.
Everywhere. From the soles of your shoes to, the tires on airplanes. That basic technology manipulating rubber started way back then. These aren't just historical curiosities, they're direct ancestors of things vital to us today.
It really makes you think. The sources mention how these ancient people aimed to make our lives easy and comfortable with their inventions.
Practical problem solving.
Which raises that question, doesn't it? For you listening, for us today, how focused are we on that? Are we learning from their ingenuity? Are we trying to serve society, make things genuinely better like they seem to be doing? It's something to ponder.
It really is. What problems are we solving for the long term?
Right. Okay, let's dive into the first of these major civilizations we've been talking about, Mesopotamia. This is often called the cradle of civilization. And yeah, it gets really interesting here. So much started in this region.
It really did. So Mesopotamia, the name itself, Greek, meaning the land between the rivers. And that tells you exactly where it was.
The Tigris and Euphrates.
Precisely. Nestled in those fertile valleys, an area that's mostly modern-day Iraq.
And we're talking old. How old?
Seriously old. The main developments, the cities and writing, kicked off somewhere between 3100 and 2900 BCE. So yeah, roughly 5,000 years ago.
5,000 years. It's almost impossible to really grasp that time frame.
It is, and their whole way of life was shaped by those rivers. The farmers living around the main cities, their lives revolved around agriculture, raising animals.
But the rivers weren't always cooperative, right? Unlike the Nile, maybe.
Exactly. They could flood unpredictably, or sometimes there just wasn't enough water reaching the fields further away. So the Mesopotamians came up with an amazing solution: canals.
Irrigation engineering.
On a massive scale. They built these complex networks to channel river water exactly where they needed it. It required huge communal effort, planning, understanding water flow. It basically transformed the landscape.
And they had tools for farming too, obviously.
Oh, yes. They prepared the ground using animals, probably oxen, pulling plows. Some plows might have had iron tips, others simpler wood. And they used stone hoes, called mames in the source, to break up the soil.
What were they growing?
Mainly wheat and barley, hearty grains that formed the basis of their diet, plus fruits and vegetables. They really mastered exploiting that fertile river valley environment.
Okay, so farming was central. What about their beliefs? How did they see the world?
Their beliefs were deeply tied to nature. They essentially saw the forces of nature as gods. Rain, wind, the floods, these were powerful deities you had to respect, maybe appease.
So they lived to please these nature gods.
That seems to have been the core belief, yes. Their whole existence depended on keeping these forces happy.
Did they have like a main god?
They had a whole pantheon. The leader, the head god, was often seen as Anu, representing the heavens. Enki was the god of the earth, incredibly important. And Enlil was the god of wind and farming, vital for agriculture.
And each city had its own god too.
Yeah, which is interesting. Each major city-state had its own patron deity, giving it a unique identity. And they built these incredible temples for them called ziggurats.
Ziggurats, those are the big step tower things.
Exactly. Like artificial mountains reaching towards the heavens. They weren't just for worship, they were administrative hubs, storage centers, really the heart of the city.
Who ran these temples? The priests.
Yes, and priests held enormous power and respect. They weren't just religious leaders. The sources say they also acted as doctors, healers, interpreters of omens. They did everything.
Wow, multi-talented.
And they looked distinctive too, shaved heads, wearing cloaks made from sheepskin. You'd know a priest when you saw one. Religion was woven into the very fabric of society and governance.
Okay, so religion and farming were key. What about trade? You mentioned that as a characteristic of civilization.
They were incredibly good at trade, clever at trade, as one source puts it. They used the rivers, naturally. Small ships, probably made of reeds, carrying food, drinks, crafted goods up and down the Euphrates and Tigris.
But not just river trade.
No, especially the Assyrians in the north of Mesopotamia. They were masters of overland trade. They'd load up donkeys with goods and travel long distances.
On donkey back.
Yep. And these weren't just one or two donkeys. They traveled in large groups, organized expeditions called caravans.
Caravans, I've heard that term. So big groups traveling together for safety and efficiency.
Exactly. Picture these long lines of donkeys carrying timber, metals, stones, things Mesopotamia didn't have naturally across the landscape. It connected them to a much wider world, essential for their economy.
So with all this activity, cities, farming, trade, religion, how was their society structured? Was everyone equal?
Definitely not. It was very hierarchical. The sources describe four main categories.
Okay, what were they?
At the top, you had the priests, hugely powerful. Then came the higher classes, nobles, wealthy merchants, landowners. Below them were the lower classes, the majority of people, free citizens, artisans, farmers, laborers, and at the very bottom were slaves.
Slaves? Prisoners of war, maybe?
Mm-hmm.
Or people in debt?
Likely both, yes. It was a common feature of ancient societies, unfortunately.
And could you tell someone's class just by looking at them?
To some extent, yes. The higher classes lived much more luxuriously. Men often had long hair and beards. Women wore fine clothes, maybe draped over one shoulder, and had long hair too. And lots of gold jewelry.
Showing off the wealth.
Absolutely. The lower classes, they lived comfortably enough, it seems, worked hard, got paid, but their clothes were simpler, less valuable jewelry, if any. You could definitely see the stratification.
Okay, this is all fascinating context, but you mentioned something earlier, writing. That feels like a really pivotal invention from Mesopotamia.
It's arguably their most profound legacy. They invented the oldest known system of writing in the world. We call it cuneiform.
Cuneiform, what does that mean?
It comes from Latin, meaning wedge-shaped, because that's what the marks look like. They didn't use pen and ink, they used a sharpened reed, a stylus, to press wedge shapes into soft clay tablets.
Writing on clay seems cumbersome.
It was, but clay was abundant, and once baked, those tablets were incredibly durable. That's why we have so many of them today.
How did it start? Was it always wedge shapes?
No, it started more like pictures, pictograms representing objects. But over time, it evolved into a more complex system where symbols could stand for syllables or sounds. Much more efficient for writing language.
And what were they writing about? Just trade records?
A lot of it was trade, yes. Keeping track of goods, payments, debts. Very practical. But they also wrote literature, the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Oh, I've heard of that.
It's considered the world's oldest literary work, written in cuneiform. It deals with big themes, life, death, friendship, meaning. Shows they were thinking deeply about the human condition, not just business.
That's amazing. And they even had a mail system with clay.
Yeah, this is brilliant. They'd write a letter on a clay tablet, then enclose it in another layer of clay, like an envelope, and bake it. Tamper-proof mail, 5,000 years ago.
Incredible ingenuity. And laws, too. Hammurabi.
Yes, the Code of Hammurabi. We have fragments of this ancient set of laws carved onto stone. It's considered the oldest comprehensive law book in the world, dating back to around 1754 BCE. It shows a real commitment to justice, order, setting rules for society. A huge step.
Mesopotamia really laid down some serious foundations. Okay, let's shift gears in geography. Moving across towards India, let's talk about the Indus River Valley Civilization. What's the big story there?
The big story with the Indus Valley, what's truly mind-blowing, is their urban planning. The level of sophistication and how they built their cities is just way ahead of its time in many respects.
Okay, tell me more. Where and when was this?
So, developed along the Indus River, naturally. Today, that area covers parts of modern Pakistan, Afghanistan, and northwest India. It peaked somewhere between 2600 and 1900 BCE, so contemporary with parts of Mesopotamian and Egyptian history.
And it was big.
Huge. Estimates suggest maybe 5 million people lived across all its settlements at its peak. That's a massive population for the ancient world.
Wow. And their cities. You mentioned planning. What was so special?
Well, the main cities we know, like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa and others like Dolavira, Kalabangan, they weren't just random collections of buildings. They were planned, often laid out on a grid system.
Like modern city blocks?
Kind of, yeah. Straight, wide streets intersecting at right angles. That implies serious foresight, centralized planning, maybe even standardized measurements.
What were the buildings made of?
Mostly burnt clay bricks. And here's another fascinating thing. The bricks seem to be standardized in size across different cities over vast distances.
Standardized bricks. That sounds almost industrial.
It does, doesn't it? It suggests mass production, organized labor, a really coordinated construction effort, but maybe the most impressive thing was their water management.
Better than Mesopotamia's canals.
Different, but arguably even more advanced in terms of sanitation. They had a very advanced system of water pipes bringing water into homes, and crucially, they had covered drains running under the streets to take sewage away.
Covered sewers. Back then.
Yes, methodically constructed gutters, wells, sewage systems. Think about public health. That's an incredible leap. Many places in the world wouldn't see that level of sanitation again for thousands of years. The Great Bath at Mohenjo-Daro also points to sophisticated water engineering, maybe for rituals too.
That's truly astonishing. What about getting around roads?
They had well-constructed roads, yes, suitable for moving goods, and we found evidence of transport, like a small terracotta model, a dummy of a cart.
A toy cart.
Possibly a toy, yes, but it shows they used wheeled carts, likely pulled by oxen, for transport. Fits with the idea of an organized society needing to move goods efficiently.
So, advanced cities, infrastructure. What about technology? Metals?
They were skilled metallurgists. They used copper, bronze, which requires alloying copper, and tin lead and tin. This means they had the technology and the trade networks to get these metals, as tin especially wasn't locally available.
So they were making tools, weapons.
Tools, weapons, ornaments, even very precise weights and measures made of metal. Clearly a society adept at working with these materials.
Did they have writing, like Mesopotamia?
They did. They invented their own system of signs that could be used as scripts. We find it mostly on small seals, square things made of stone, often with animal carvings.
Seals for what? Trade.
That's the leading theory, maybe indicating ownership or the contents of goods being traded. But here's the catch.
What?
We can't read it. The Indus script remains undeciphered.
Seriously, after all this time?
Seriously. It's one of the great archaeological mysteries. We have hundreds, thousands of examples, but no Rosetta Stone, no bilingual text to crack the code. We know they had writing, but we don't know what it says. Imagine the secrets locked away in those symbols.
That's tantalizing.
Yeah.
So frustrating. Do we know anything about their people, their society? Who was in charge?
It's harder without readable text, but we get glimpses. There's a famous small sculpture found, widely thought to be a priest, or maybe a priest king.
What makes them think it's a priest?
It has specific details, a band worn on the forehead, maybe indicating high status, and the eyes are half closed, sort of meditative looking. It hints at a religious or ruling elite, someone important in their social structure, but much of their society remains enigmatic because we can't read their words.
Still, the planning, the sanitation,
Yeah.
it paints a picture of a very organized, perhaps quite standardized civilization.
Absolutely. Highly advanced for its time, just silent in many ways.
Okay, let's journey now to another icon,
Yeah.
ancient Egypt, the Nile, pharaohs, pyramids. This one really captures the imagination. What's the core story here?
Egypt is just epic in scale and duration. Developed along the Nile River, obviously, in northeast Africa. Kicked off around 3100 BCE, roughly parallel with early Mesopotamia, but it endured as a major civilization for an incredibly long time, nearly 3,000 years under the rule of pharaohs.
Pharaohs seen as gods, right?
Yes, divine kings ruling these successive dynasties. And their civilization was utterly dependent on the Nile. Unlike the Tigris and Euphrates, the Nile flooded predictably, reliably, every year, leaving behind rich, fertile silt.
Perfect for farming.
Absolutely perfect. They mastered irrigation, harnessing the Nile's flood to create enormous agricultural surpluses, which funded everything else, the huge population, the monumental building projects, the armies.
And when we think Egypt, we think pyramids.
You can't not. They are considered Egypt's greatest legacy. These weren't palaces for the living, they were tombs. Elaborate, monumental houses for eternity, built to protect the bodies of pharaohs and ensure their successful journey into the afterlife.
The scale is just mind-boggling. The ones at Giza.
The Giza pyramids near Cairo are the most famous. The oldest Egyptian pyramids, like the Step Pyramid, date back to around 2630 BCE. The Great Pyramid at Giza itself is one of the ancient seven wonders of the world. Millions of massive stone blocks, quarried, moved, lifted, placed with incredible precision.
And they even do it.
Still debated, but it clearly required phenomenal organization, logistics, engineering, and a huge amount of labor, all driven by that powerful belief in the pharaoh's divinity and the afterlife.
It wasn't just pyramids, though. We have amazing art, personal stories.
Nefertiti.
Queen Nefertiti, yes. Wife of Pharaoh Akhenaten, around 1370 BCE. She's famed for her beauty. One source calls her one of the most beautiful women who lived in the ancient time. We have that incredible painted bust of her.
The one in Berlin. It looks so modern.
It's astonishingly lifelike. It must have been created while she was alive. The detail is so fine. And she wasn't just a pretty face. She was powerful, even ruled for a time after her husband died. Shows the potential influence of royal women.
And their paintings. Tomb paintings. Beautiful examples. The source mentions one showing a prince chasing after a flock of birds. These tomb paintings, temple reliefs, papyrus scrolls, they depict everything. Daily life, farming, battles, religious rituals, myths about the afterlife, vibrant colors, distinctive style. They give us such a rich visual record.
So art and monuments were huge. What about writing and preserving things? They were masters of that too, weren't they?
Absolutely. They developed their own unique script. Hieroglyphs.
The picture writing.
Exactly. Egyptian pictograms, combining figures of animals, objects, symbols. It looks decorative, but it was a fully functional, complex writing system. Scholars created this set of symbols, drawing from pictures of various items used and seen in their day-to-day life. They carved it on stone, painted it on walls, wrote it on papyrus.
And preservation.
Mummies.
Mummification,
Yep.
the most distinctive practice perhaps. They introduced this incredibly elaborate method to preserve dead bodies for a very long time. It wasn't just wrapping them up. It was a complex scientific process tied deeply to their religious beliefs about the soul needing the body in the afterlife. How did they do it?
Removing organs, drying the body with natron salts, meticulously wrapping it in linen. It took weeks, an amazing understanding of chemistry and anatomy for the time, and it worked.
King Tut.
King Tutankhamun is the prime example because his tomb was found almost intact. Ruled briefly, died young, around 1323 BCE, and that golden mask which was placed on the face of the mummy.
Iconic.
Absolutely stunning. A masterpiece of art and funerary practice. His tomb gave us an unparalleled glimpse into the wealth, the beliefs, the sophistication surrounding Egyptian royalty, and their journey to the next world. The mummification was incredibly successful.
Okay, wow. We've covered a lot of ground, from those first villages taking root
To the rise of cities, the invention of writing in Mesopotamia,
the incredible urban planning of the Indus Valley.
and the monumental achievements and preservation techniques of Egypt.
So, reflecting on all this, what does it mean for you listening right now? We've seen how these ancient societies weren't just footnotes in history books.
Not at all. If you connect it all, it's so clear they laid the groundwork for, well, for us. Our timekeeping, our math, our cities, our laws, writing itself, so much started back then. It really shows this continuous thread of human ingenuity, this drive to organize, to innovate, to build something lasting.
They were tackling the big challenges of their time. And that leads to one final thought, maybe a challenge for you to take away. These ancient civilizations, they invented things to make our lives easy and comfortable. They were focused on progress, on solving problems. So think about us today. 5,000 years from now, people look back at our time. What inventions, what progress would we be remembered for? What legacy, what fundamental contributions that make life better are we creating right now? Something to mull over.